My name is Juliet Ward. And the empty velvet box in my hands felt heavier than the ring that once lived inside it. My ex had sold the symbol of our love for quick cash, but he had no idea he had just ignited the fire that would build my $1 million empire. The afternoon sunlight streamed through my apartment window as I sat on my bed, staring at the hollow space where my engagement ring should have been resting. The burgundy velvet looked worn and faded, like everything else in my relationship with Daniel. I could not breathe. My chest tightened as the realization hit me like a freight train. The ring was gone. Not lost. Not misplaced. Sold. By the man who had once promised to love and protect me forever. Daniel. I called out, my voice cracking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. He walked into the bedroom with that casual swagger he always carried, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His brown hair was messy, his stubble unkempt, and there was something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Something cold. Something heartless. Where is my ring? I demanded, holding up the empty box. He shrugged. Actually shrugged. As if I had asked him about the weather. I sold it, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees go weak, my hands trembling as I gripped the velvet box tighter. You what? You heard me. I needed the cash. My credit cards are maxed out, and I owe Marcus $3,000 from poker night. I stared at him in complete shock. This was the same man who had gotten down on one knee 6 months ago, tears in his eyes as he promised me a lifetime of happiness. The same man who had held me as I cried about my mother's death. The same man I had planned to marry in 8 weeks. That was my ring. I whispered, my voice barely audible. You had no right. Oh, come off it, Juliet, he interrupted, rolling his eyes. That ring was not doing you any good anyway. Just sitting there in that box, collecting dust. At least now it served a purpose. I could not believe what I was hearing. The callousness. The complete lack of respect. The way he dismissed something so precious to me, as if it were nothing more than spare change found between couch cushions. A purpose. I stood up, my legs shaking. Daniel, that ring represented our future. Our commitment. Our love. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was bitter and cruel. Love. Jules, let me tell you something about love. Love does not pay the bills. Love does not get Marcus off my back. Love is just a pretty word people use to make themselves feel better about settling. The room spun around me. I felt like I was falling through the floor, tumbling into an abyss of betrayal and heartbreak. This could not be happening. This could not be real. How much? I asked quietly. What? How much did you get for it? He looked uncomfortable for the first time since this nightmare began. His eyes darted away from mine, focusing on the floor. $1,500. $1,500. My 2-carat diamond ring, the ring he had spent 3 months' salary on according to him, had been sold for $1,500. I knew enough about jewelry to know he had been ripped off spectacularly, but that was not the point. The point was that he had valued my trust, my feelings, my future at $1,500. The ring cost $8,000. I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. You told me you saved for a year to buy it. The market is tough right now, he mumbled, still not meeting my eyes. Pawn shops do not pay retail. Pawn shop. He had taken my engagement ring to a pawn shop like it was some worthless trinket he had found in a garage sale. I felt something shift inside me. The crushing weight of heartbreak was still there, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something hot and fierce and unstoppable. Rage. Pure, crystalline rage. Get out, I said quietly. What? I said get out. Pack your things and get out of my apartment. We are done. Jules, come on. Do not be so dramatic. It is just a ring. We can get another one after the wedding when I get back on my feet. I stared at him in amazement. Even now, even after what he had done, he thought there was still going to be a wedding. He thought I would still marry him after this betrayal. There is not going to be a wedding, Daniel. There is not going to be an us anymore. You sold that along with my ring. For the first time, I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. You do not mean that. I have never meant anything more in my entire life. You have 30 minutes to get your stuff and go. After that, I am calling the police and having you removed." I walked out of the bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I could hear him behind me calling my name, but I did not turn around. I could not. If I looked at him again, I might lose my resolve. I sat in my living room, staring at the wall, listening to him bang around in the bedroom, packing his belongings. 28 minutes later, I heard the front door slam shut. And then I was alone. The silence was deafening. I sat there for what felt like hours, just breathing, just existing, just trying to process what had happened to my life in the span of 30 minutes. Then I cried. I cried until my eyes were swollen, and my throat was raw. I cried for the future I had lost, for the man I thought I knew, for the naive girl who had believed in forever. I cried until there were no tears left. But as I sat there in the growing darkness of my apartment, something remarkable happened. The rage I had felt earlier began to crystallize into something else. Something powerful. Determination. I walked to my bedroom and sat at my small desk, pulling out a sketchpad I had not touched in years. Before Daniel, before my corporate job, before I had convinced myself that practical was better than passionate, I had dreamed of being a jewelry designer. I had studied art in college, spent countless hours learning about gemstones and metals, sketching designs late into the night. But somewhere along the way, I had let that dream die. I had let Daniel convince me that art was not a real career, that I needed something stable and boring and safe. Well, safe had just sold my engagement ring for gambling money. I picked up my pencil and began to sketch. The design that flowed from my hand was unlike anything I had ever created before. It was bold and fierce, with clean lines and sharp angles. It was a ring, but not an engagement ring. This was something else entirely. This was a statement piece. A declaration of independence. I sketched for hours, design after design pouring out of me like water breaking through a dam. Necklaces that looked like armor. Earrings that resembled tiny swords. Bracelets that spoke of strength and resilience. By the time the sun rose, I had filled 20 pages with designs. And I knew what I was going to do. I was going to build something beautiful from the ashes of my destroyed relationship. I was going to take the pain Daniel had caused me and transform it into something powerful. Something mine. The next few weeks passed in a blur of research and planning. I spent every free moment learning about the jewelry industry, studying online marketplaces, researching suppliers and manufacturers. I read everything I could find about starting a business, about marketing, about building a brand from nothing. I used my savings, money I had been setting aside for our wedding, to buy basic jewelry making tools and a small selection of semi-precious stones. I converted my spare bedroom into a makeshift workshop, covering every surface with sketches and samples and half-finished pieces. My corporate job became a means to an end. I would sit in meetings, nodding and taking notes, while my mind was elsewhere, designing and planning and dreaming. My colleagues probably thought I was having some sort of breakdown. They were not entirely wrong. But it was a good breakdown. A necessary breakdown. After 3 weeks of 18-hour days, I had my first collection ready. 5 pieces, each one carefully crafted by hand in my tiny workshop. A statement necklace with raw amethyst stones that looked like purple fire. Earrings made from hammered silver that caught the light like lightning. A bracelet with tiny onyx beads that felt substantial and grounding on the wrist. A cocktail ring with a smoky quartz center that seemed to hold secrets in its depths. And a pendant necklace with a small diamond. Not an engagement diamond, but a diamond that said, "I am enough, just as I am." I named my brand Aurora Grace. Aurora for new beginnings, for the dawn that comes after the darkest night. Grace for the elegance I wanted every woman to feel when she wore my jewelry, but also for the grace I was learning to give myself as I rebuilt my life. I set up an online store using every free platform I could find. I wrote product descriptions that told stories, not just about the jewelry, but about the women who might wear them. I took photographs in my apartment, using natural light and simple backgrounds, letting the pieces speak for themselves. I launched the store on a Tuesday morning at exactly 8 a.m. By 8:15, I had my first sale. By noon, I had sold 3 pieces. By the end of the week, my entire first collection was gone. I could not believe it. I sat staring at my computer screen, refreshing the page over and over again, convinced there had been some kind of mistake. But the numbers did not lie. 5 pieces, sold to 5 different women in 4 different states. And the messages. Oh, the messages. This necklace makes me feel like a warrior princess. I wear these earrings to every important meeting. They make me feel powerful. Thank you for creating jewelry that tells a story. But it was the last message that made me cry. I just got divorced after my husband cheated on me with my best friend. Your bracelet was the first thing I bought for myself in 10 years that was not practical or necessary. It was just beautiful. Just for me. Thank you for reminding me that I deserve beautiful things. I realized something profound in that moment. I was not just selling jewelry. I was selling transformation. I was selling the feeling of taking your power back, of choosing yourself, of rising from the ashes stronger than before. I immediately began working on my second collection. This time I had more confidence, more resources, and more stories to tell. I reached out to local artisans, learning new techniques, experimenting with different materials. I started an Instagram account, sharing not just photos of my jewelry, but the stories behind each piece, the inspiration, the meaning. The response was incredible. Women began tagging their friends, sharing their own stories of transformation and resilience. They posted photos of themselves wearing my jewelry to job interviews, first dates after divorces, important presentations, celebrations of personal victories both big and small. My second collection sold out in 3 days. Then something amazing happened. A lifestyle blogger with 50,000 followers discovered my brand and wrote a post about it. She called it Jewelry for Women Who Refused to Be Broken. The post went viral. Orders started pouring in faster than I could fulfill them. I had to take time off from my corporate job to keep up with demand. My spare bedroom workshop was no longer adequate. I rented a small studio space and hired my first employee, a recent art school graduate named Maya Chun who had the most incredible eye for detail. By the end of my first year in business, Aurora Grace had grown beyond anything I had imagined possible. We had expanded into multiple product lines. Everyday pieces for women who wanted to carry a little bit of strength with them wherever they went, and statement pieces for those moments when you needed the world to know you were not to be underestimated. We had celebrity customers, influencers, women writing to tell me that wearing my jewelry had given them the confidence to ask for a promotion, to leave an unhappy relationship, to start their own business, to chase their dreams. I had gone from sketching on scraps of paper in my bedroom to running a company with 12 employees and customers in 37 countries. But the most satisfying moment came on a rainy Thursday afternoon in October, exactly 14 months after Daniel had sold my engagement ring. I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop, the one near my new studio, working on designs for the holiday collection. My laptop was open, spreadsheets showing numbers that would have seemed impossible just a year before. Aurora Grace had just closed its most successful quarter yet. In 3 months, we had generated more revenue than Daniel made in 5 years at his sales job. I was sipping my latte, completely absorbed in my work, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "No, Marcus, I told you I would have your money by Friday. I just need a few more days." I turned around slowly, my heart beginning to race. It was Daniel. He looked terrible. His hair was greasier than I remembered, his clothes wrinkled and ill-fitting. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were shaking slightly as he held his phone to his ear. "I know I said that last month, but this time is different. I have a lead on a big sale." He was still lying to people, still making promises he could not keep, still trying to gamble his way out of the hole he had dug for himself. As I watched him, I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. No longing for what we had once had. Just pity. He ended his phone call and slumped back in his chair, running his hands through his greasy hair. That was when he saw me. Our eyes met across the coffee shop, and I watched as recognition dawned on his face. His mouth fell open slightly, and he stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. "Juliet." I smiled politely and nodded. "Hello, Daniel." He walked over to my table, his movements nervous and jerky. You look incredible," he stammered. "Really different. Successful." I was wearing one of my own designs, A simple but elegant necklace with a moonstone pendant that caught the light beautifully. My hair was styled, my makeup was done, and I was wearing a designer blazer I had been able to afford thanks to my company's success. "Thank you," I said simply. "What are you? I mean, are you still at the marketing firm?" "No, actually. I started my own business." His eyebrows shot up. "Really? What kind of business?" I gestured to my laptop screen, where the Aurora Grace website was displayed prominently. "Jewelry design." He leaned forward to look at the screen, and I watched his face change as he took in the professional photography, the sleek website design, the testimonials from satisfied customers. This is yours." "Yes." He scrolled through the page, his eyes growing wider with each click. "These prices? Jules, this is serious money." "Yes, it is." He looked up at me with something I had never seen in his eyes before. Respect. And maybe a little fear. "How much are you? I mean, if you do not mind me asking." I closed my laptop and looked at him directly. "Last quarter, Aurora Grace generated more revenue than you made in the last 5 years combined." The color drained from his face. That is incredible, Jules." "Really? I always knew you were talented, but I never thought." "You never thought I could build something like this?" He shifted uncomfortably. "It is not that. It is just, when we were together, you never seemed interested in taking risks. You always wanted the safe option." I laughed, and the sound was lighter and freer than any laugh I had shared with him during our entire relationship. "You were the safe option, Daniel. And look how that turned out." He winced. "Jules, about what happened. About the ring. I was in a really bad place and I held up my hand to stop him. "Daniel, I need you to understand something. What you did to me was the best thing that ever happened to me." He stared at me in confusion. "When you sold my engagement ring, you thought you were taking something away from me. But what you actually did was free me. You freed me from a relationship that was making me smaller instead of bigger. You freed me from a future that would have been safe and comfortable and completely unfulfilling." I leaned forward, my voice growing stronger. "You sold my ring for $1,500 to pay off gambling debts. I took that betrayal and built a company worth more than you will probably make in your entire lifetime." His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I deserved that," he said quietly. "Yes, you did." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he looked up at me with something that might have been genuine remorse. "I am sorry, Juliet. Really sorry. Not just about the ring, but about everything. About not believing in you. About trying to make you smaller. About being too much of a coward to be the partner you deserved." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But he looked genuinely broken. "Genuinely sorry. I appreciate that, Daniel. I do. But your apology does not change anything. It cannot undo what you did or give me back the time I wasted." "I know." I gathered my things and stood up. "I hope you figure out whatever is going on with your gambling problem. I hope you find a way to be happy. But mostly, I hope you learn to treat the people you claim to love with the respect they deserve." As I turned to leave, he called out one more time. "Jules, for what it is worth, I am proud of you. Really proud." I stopped and looked back at him. "Thank you. But your pride is not something I need anymore." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling lighter than I had in years. 6 months later, Aurora Grace was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Business Empire. How One Woman Turned Heartbreak into a $1 Million Brand." The article told the whole story. Daniel selling my ring, my late-night sketching sessions, the first collection that sold out in a week, the growth of the company from a spare bedroom operation to an international brand. But my favorite part was the quote they used from me at the end. Someone once told me that my engagement ring was not doing me any good just sitting in a box. He was right, but not in the way he thought. That ring was not doing me any good, because it represented settling for less than I deserved. When he sold it, he forced me to confront the truth. I did not need a ring to prove my worth. I needed to prove it to myself. The day the magazine hit newsstands, my phone would not stop ringing. Media requests, interview opportunities, speaking engagements. Everyone wanted to hear the story of Aurora Grace. But the call that meant the most came from Maya, my first employee, who had grown with the company and was now my head of design. "Juliet, you need to see this," she said, her voice excited. "What is it?" "Check our website traffic. Check our sales numbers. Check our social media." I pulled up the analytics on my computer and could not believe what I was seeing. The magazine feature had triggered an avalanche of interest. Orders were pouring in faster than ever before. Our social media followers had doubled overnight. Women from around the world were sharing their own stories of transformation and resilience, tagging Aurora Grace as their inspiration. But it was not just about the numbers. It was about the messages. I left my emotionally abusive husband and bought myself your Phoenix Rising necklace as a symbol of my new beginning. I wore your warrior queen earrings to my PhD defense. I felt invincible. After my breast cancer diagnosis, your unbreakable bracelet became my talisman. I wore it to every chemo session. I started my own business at 55 and your jewelry gave me the confidence to believe I could succeed. These were not just customers. These were women who had found strength in the pieces I created, who had taken the pain and hope I had poured into each design and made it their own. I realized that Aurora Grace had become something bigger than a jewelry company. It had become a movement. A community of women who refused to let their circumstances define them, who chose to rise instead of fall, who understood that sometimes the most beautiful things are born from the most painful experiences. 3 years after Daniel sold my engagement ring, Aurora Grace employed 47 people across 3 countries. We had retail partnerships with major department stores, a flagship boutique in New York City, and a waiting list for custom pieces that stretched 6 months out. I had been invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship and resilience. I had been featured in countless magazines and podcasts. I had even written a book about building a business from heartbreak that became a bestseller. But none of that mattered as much as the moment when I received a letter from a 17-year-old girl in Ohio. "Dear Ms. Ward," it began. "I read your story in my mom's magazine, and it changed my life. My boyfriend was pressuring me to give up my dream of studying art because he said it was not practical. After reading about how you built Aurora Grace from nothing, I realized that I do not need anyone's permission to chase my dreams. I broke up with him yesterday and submitted my portfolio to art school today. Thank you for showing me that it is better to bet on yourself than to settle for someone else's small vision of your future." I cried when I read that letter. Not tears of sadness, but tears of joy and pride and overwhelming gratitude. This was why Daniel had to sell my engagement ring. This was why I had to experience that betrayal, that heartbreak, that moment of complete devastation. Not so that I could get revenge, but so that I could discover who I really was when everything was stripped away. I had thought that ring represented my value, my worth, my future. But I had been wrong. My value was not in a piece of jewelry that someone else had chosen for me. My value was in my creativity, my resilience, my ability to transform pain into beauty and heartbreak into hope. Daniel had sold my engagement ring for $1,500, thinking he was taking something precious from me. But what he had actually done was set me free to discover that I was worth so much more than I had ever imagined. Aurora Grace was not just my company. It was my declaration of independence, my love letter to every woman who had ever been told she was not enough, my proof that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a much better one. As I sat in my office that evening, looking out at the city lights, I thought about the scared, heartbroken woman I had been 3 years ago. The woman who had cried over an empty ring box and thought her world was ending. I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now. That betrayal would become her superpower. That heartbreak would become her fuel. That the worst thing that ever happened to her would also be the best thing. That she did not need a ring on her finger to prove her worth, because her worth was not something that could be bought or sold or pawned for quick cash. Her worth was something she would build with her own hands, one beautiful piece at a time, and it would be worth more than she ever dreamed possible. I picked up my sketch pad and began working on my next design. A ring, but not an engagement ring. A ring that said, "I am enough." A ring that said, "I choose myself." A ring that said, "My story is just beginning." Because sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes the best revenge is success. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's betrayal define your worth. I built Aurora Grace from the ashes of my broken engagement, but more importantly, I built myself. I discovered that I was not a woman who needed saving or protecting or someone else's validation. I was a woman who could save herself. And that discovery was worth more than any engagement ring ever could be. The empty velvet box that had once felt so heavy in my hands now sat on a shelf in my office, serving as a reminder of how far I had come. Sometimes visitors would ask about it, and I would tell them the story of how that empty box had been the beginning of everything. Because it had not been empty at all. It had been full of possibility, full of potential, full of the future I was brave enough to build for myself. Daniel had sold my engagement ring, thinking he was taking something valuable from me. But what he had actually done was give me something priceless. The knowledge that I did not need anyone else to make my life beautiful. I could do that all by myself. If this story of transformation and triumph resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of women who refused to let betrayal define them, and instead built something extraordinary from their pain. Your support helps us share stories that remind women everywhere of their incredible strength and potential. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of survivors who became thrivers.